entitled parents my MIL called me names so I got her shunned from church. The voicemail was still playing when I heard my own name followed by the words godless harlot in my mother-in-law's sickeningly sweet church voice. I'd grabbed David's phone by mistake that morning, thinking it was mine when it buzzed on the kitchen counter. We had the same case, and in my rush to get to my job interview, I didn't look twice. It wasn't until I was sitting in the parking lot afterward, riding the high of what I was pretty sure had been a successful interview, that I noticed the string of missed calls and messages. The first voicemail started innocuously enough. David, honey, it's Mom. I've been thinking more about our conversation, and I really think you need to reconsider. Then came the part that made my blood freeze. That wife of yours. I know you love her, but sweetheart, the whole church is talking. A godless harlot who lived in sin before marriage has no place in a Christian home. I've been praying for your eyes to be open to her true nature. I sat there in stunned silence as she continued, her voice taking on that particular tone of false concern that I'd learned to recognize over the past 6 months of marriage. Pastor Williams agrees that her influence on you has been troubling. The way she dresses, the way she speaks to her elders, that job at the bar before you met her, it all speaks to a pattern of sinful behavior. And don't get me started on how she disrespected me at Sunday dinner when she contradicted me about scripture. A godly wife submits, David. She doesn't argue. My hands were shaking as the message went on. She was talking about the fundraiser committee meeting, how she'd shared her concerns about me with the other ladies, how they all agreed that David deserved better. How they were praying for him to find the strength to make the right choice. I know divorce isn't ideal, but sometimes God opens our eyes to mistakes we've made. You rushed into this marriage, honey. It's not too late to fix it. Call me back. We need to discuss your future, your real future, without her dragging you down to her level. The message ended with I love you in that same syrupy tone that had fooled me for exactly one family dinner before I realized what I was dealing with. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, listening to that message 3 times, feeling something cold and hard settling in my chest. 6 months. 6 months of her smiling to my face while apparently conducting a full-scale campaign behind my back to destroy my marriage. The job interview suddenly felt like a lifetime ago. All I could think about were the strange looks I'd been getting at church lately, the way conversation stopped when I walked by, how David's cousin Sarah had suddenly started being cold to me for no reason I could understand. Now I understood perfectly. Margaret Holloway, pillar of Riverside Baptist Church, volunteer coordinator for the annual missions fundraiser, leader of the Women's Prayer Circle, had declared war on me. And apparently, she was winning. I started David's car and began the drive home, my mind racing. For months, I'd been trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law, biting my tongue when she made her little comments, smiling through her passive-aggressive remarks about my cooking, my clothes, my career. I'd even started attending her Bible study, thinking it would help us bond. What an absolute fool I'd been. But as I pulled into our driveway, one thought echoed louder than my hurt and anger. Margaret Holloway wanted to play games with reputations and church gossip? Game on. When David got home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with his phone placed carefully in front of me. He walked in with that easy smile he always wore after his coaching practice, dropping his gym bag by the door and kissing the top of my head like nothing had changed. How did the interview go? He asked, opening the fridge. Sorry, I missed your call earlier. Had back-to-back meetings, then practice ran long. The interview went fine, I said, watching his face. But we need to talk about something else. He must have heard something in my tone because he closed the fridge door and turned to look at me properly. That's when he noticed his phone. Is that, why do you have my phone? I grabbed it by mistake this morning. David, you need to listen to your voicemails. His expression shifted from confusion to something that looked almost like panic, so quickly I almost missed it. Almost. Which voicemails? The fact that he had to ask which ones told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't the first time his mother had called to discuss my many failings as a wife and Christian woman. Your mother called. She had some very interesting things to say about me. And apparently, so does Pastor Williams. And the ladies' committee. And half the congregation. My voice was steady, but my hands were clenched in my lap. How long, David? He sank into the chair across from me, running his hands through his hair. For a long moment, he didn't say anything, and the silence stretched between us like a canyon. How long have you known what she's been saying about me? Sarah, it's not, she's just concerned. She doesn't understand you yet. Concerned? I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. She called me a godless harlot, David. She's been telling people at church that I'm a bad influence on you, that you should divorce me. She's been doing this for months, and you knew. I told her to stop, he said quietly, still not looking at me. After the first few times, I told her she needed to give you a chance. The first few times? My voice cracked. How many times has your mother called to tell you to leave me? It's not like that. How many times? He finally looked up at me, and I could see the guilt written all over his face. She calls every few days. But Sarah, I don't listen to her. I'm not going anywhere. I married you, not her opinion of you. Every few days. For 6 months. While I'd been beating myself up, wondering why I couldn't seem to win over his family, wondering why church felt increasingly uncomfortable, David had been fielding regular calls from his mother about what a terrible wife I was. And you never thought to tell me? To warn me that she was spreading rumors about me at church? To maybe stand up for me? I didn't want to upset you. I thought if I ignored it, she'd eventually get over it and accept you. Well, that worked out great. I grabbed his phone and headed for the stairs. She's turned half the congregation against me, David. People I thought were my friends are apparently praying for you to find the courage to divorce me. But sure, ignoring it was definitely the right strategy. Sarah, wait, where are you going? I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and turned back to him. I'm going upstairs to figure out what I'm going to do about this. Because unlike you, I'm not going to just sit here and let your mother destroy my reputation without fighting back. The look of alarm that crossed his face should have been satisfying. Instead, it just made me angrier. I spent the next 3 days doing research, and what I found made Margaret's campaign against me look like child's play. It started innocently enough. I was looking up the church's financial records online. They posted quarterly reports for transparency when I noticed something odd about the mission's fundraiser numbers. The committee had raised $15,000 for the children's orphanage in Guatemala, but only $12,500 had been sent. The remaining $2,500 was listed as administrative costs. Administrative costs for writing a check and mailing it seemed excessive. So I dug deeper. I called my friend Jessica, who'd helped with last year's fundraiser before she switched churches. Over coffee, she mentioned how Margaret had insisted on handling all the money herself, how she'd been defensive when anyone asked questions about expenses. I probably shouldn't say this, Jessica said, lowering her voice, but there were rumors. Nothing proven, you understand, but some of the ladies thought the numbers didn't add up. Margaret always had an explanation, but... Then I remembered something that had seemed innocent at the time. 2 months ago, Margaret had shown up to Sunday service wearing a designer handbag that cost more than David's monthly car payment. When someone complimented it, she'd laughed and said it was an unexpected blessing from above. Tuesday evening, I volunteered to help clean the church after the youth group meeting. I wasn't officially scheduled, but I told myself I needed to start repairing relationships if I was going to survive Margaret's character assassination campaign. I was wiping down tables in the fellowship hall when I heard voices from the choir room. The door was slightly ajar, and I recognized Margaret's laugh immediately, not her church lady laugh, but something lower, more intimate. We have to be more careful, she was saying. David's wife has been asking questions about the fundraiser. What kind of questions? The male voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. Jessica Chen mentioned that Sarah called her. I knew that girl would be trouble from the moment David brought her around. I crept closer to the door, my heart pounding. Maybe we should cool it for a while. Take a break from the committee meetings. Robert, we've been over this. No one suspects anything about us. They think we're just dedicated volunteers working late. Robert Mitchell, the choir director. Robert Mitchell, who was married to sweet, soft-spoken Linda Mitchell. Robert Mitchell, who led the church in prayer every Sunday about the sanctity of marriage. But the money is fine. $2,500 over 6 months isn't enough for anyone to notice, and I've been careful about the documentation. Besides, after all the work we put in, don't we deserve a little compensation? I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. Linda's been asking why I'm home so late on committee nights. Tell her we're planning something special for Christmas. She'll believe it, she always does. There was a sound I really didn't want to identify, followed by Margaret's voice again, playful now. Besides, if anyone starts sniffing around, I'll just redirect their attention. Did you know David's wife used to work at Finnegan's Bar? Served drinks to married men, took their money with a smile. Makes you wonder what else she was willing to do for tips. My face burned with rage. I'd worked at that bar for 8 months while finishing my degree, serving food and drinks to pay my bills. It was honest work, but Margaret was clearly spinning it into something sordid. You're terrible, Robert said, but he was laughing. I'm protective of my family. And my church. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I backed away from the door carefully, my mind racing. Margaret Holloway, moral crusader and defender of Christian values, was stealing from orphans and sleeping with a married man. And she thought I was the sinner. I made it home without David noticing anything was wrong, but inside I was a mess of rage and vindication. For 3 days, I carried around the weight of what I discovered, turning it over in my mind like a weapon I wasn't sure I was ready to use. The smart thing would have been to go to David first. Tell him what I'd overheard, let him decide how to handle his mother's hypocrisy. But every time I started to bring it up, I remembered his face when I'd confronted him about the voicemails, that look of resignation, like he'd rather pretend problems didn't exist than actually solve them. Besides, Margaret had made this personal. She'd spent months systematically destroying my reputation while living a lie that made my supposed sins look like jaywalking. Friday evening, I was still wrestling with what to do when my decision got made for me. I was at the grocery store, reaching for pasta sauce, when I heard familiar voices in the next aisle over. Just breaks my heart for David, Margaret was saying. That poor boy has no idea what kind of woman he married. The signs were all there from the beginning, another voice replied. I recognized it as Helen Crawford from the Ladies' Auxiliary. I mean, no Christian woman shows up to church in skirts that short. My hand froze on the jar of marinara. And did you see her at the potluck last week? Margaret's voice dripped with false concern. Arguing with Pastor Williams about that sermon on submission. A godly wife doesn't correct church leadership, especially not in public. I'd asked a clarifying question about biblical interpretation. One question. But apparently, that qualified as arguing. I heard she hasn't even been baptized, Helen said. That was a flat-out lie. I'd been baptized at 14 in my home church in Ohio. I wouldn't be surprised, Margaret replied. David is blinded by lust, poor thing. He can't see what she really is. Well, hopefully he'll come to his senses soon. A man needs a wife who'll support his faith, not drag him down into sin. I stood there, trembling with fury, listening to them tear apart my character while Margaret played the part of concerned mother-in-law. The woman who was stealing from orphans and having an affair was holding herself up as the moral authority on my marriage. That's when I saw them through the gap between shelves. Margaret was picking up a bottle of expensive wine, the kind that cost $40, while she talked about my character flaws. Helen was nodding along sympathetically, completely unaware that she was taking marriage advice from an adulteress. I just pray David realizes his mistake before it's too late, Margaret concluded, checking the price tag on the wine like money was no object. I thought about the $2,500 she'd skimmed from the orphanage fund. I thought about Linda Mitchell, who made homemade cookies for Robert every week and still blushed when he complimented her dress. I thought about David, caught between his loyalty to his mother and his love for me, choosing the path of least resistance while I got crucified in church gossip circles. The decision crystallized in my mind with perfect clarity. Margaret wanted to play reputation games? She wanted to destroy my standing in the community while positioning herself as the moral high ground? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Pastor Williams' contact information. My hands were steady as I typed. Pastor Williams, I have some concerns about financial irregularities in the missions fund that I think you should know about. Could we meet privately this weekend? There are also some other matters regarding church leadership that require your immediate attention. I hit send before I could second guess myself. Then I texted David, working late tonight. Don't wait up. I had research to do, documentation to gather, and a case to build. Margaret had taught me well, reputation was everything in a community like ours. She was about to learn that lesson the hard way. I spent Saturday morning at the public library, printing out financial records and cross-referencing dates. 3 years of missions fundraiser reports, bank statements that were public record, and a timeline that painted a very clear picture of Margaret's administrative costs getting progressively larger. Pastor Williams had responded to my text within an hour, agreeing to meet Sunday after evening service. I could practically hear the concern in his carefully worded reply. Financial irregularities were serious business in a church that prided itself on transparency. But as I sat there organizing my evidence, doubt crept in like a cold draft. Was I really going to do this? Destroy my mother-in-law's life over hurt feelings and church gossip? Then I remembered her voice on that voicemail, the casual cruelty with which she dismissed my worth as a human being. The months of smiling at her while she systematically turned my new community against me. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Mom invited us to lunch after church tomorrow. Please try to make an effort with her. Make an effort. Like this whole mess was somehow my fault for not trying hard enough to win over a woman who'd been sabotaging me from day one. I texted back, can't make lunch. Have a meeting after service. His response came immediately, what meeting? Church business. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before he finally replied, Sarah, whatever you're planning, please think about it first. So he knew. Of course he knew. 6 months of marriage and David could already read the warning signs when I was done playing nice. Already thinking. That's the problem. The dots appeared again, then stopped. No reply came. Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I sat through service hyper-aware of every glance, every whispered conversation, wondering how many people already thought of me as the harlot corrupting poor David Holloway. Margaret was in her usual spot 3 rows ahead, wearing a navy dress that probably cost more than my car payment. She sang hymns with her hands raised, the picture of Christian devotion. During the prayer requests, she stood to ask for guidance for families struggling with difficult situations, her eyes finding mine across the sanctuary. The audacity was breathtaking. After the service, she made her way over with that familiar smile. Sarah, dear, we missed you at the ladies' meeting this week. I do hope you'll make time for fellowship soon. I've been busy, I said evenly. Of course, of course. David mentioned you might not make lunch today. Church business, he said. Her tone was light, but her eyes were sharp. I wasn't aware you joined any committees. There's a lot you're not aware of, Margaret. Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe, or calculation. She wasn't used to me pushing back directly. Well, she said, recovering her composure, I hope whatever it is, you'll remember that church matters should be handled with discretion. We're a family here, and families work through things privately. The threat was subtle but clear, don't air dirty laundry, or things will get worse for you. You're absolutely right, I said, matching her sweet tone. Families should definitely handle things privately. It's amazing what happens when private matters become public, don't you think? Her smile faltered for just a moment. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. I'm sure you don't. David appeared at my elbow, looking between us with barely concealed anxiety. Ready to go, Sarah? Actually, I need to speak with Pastor Williams. You two go ahead to lunch. Sarah, David started, but I was already walking away. Pastor Williams was in his office, still wearing his robes, when I knocked. The folder of evidence felt heavy in my hands. Thank you for meeting with me, Pastor. I think you're going to want to sit down for this. I spread the documents across Pastor Williams' desk like I was laying out evidence in a courtroom. His expression shifted from polite concern to genuine alarm as he processed what he was seeing. These are financial records from the missions fund over the past 3 years, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. Notice how the administrative costs have increased each year, from 2% to nearly 20% of total donations. Pastor Williams adjusted his glasses, leaning forward to study the papers. He was a kind man in his 50s, the type who genuinely believed the best of his congregation until proven otherwise. Watching his face fall as he connected the dots felt like watching someone's faith crack in real time. And this, I continued, sliding another document forward, is Margaret's personal banking activity, public record since she applied for that community volunteer grant last year. Notice the cash deposits that coincide with the dates money was withdrawn from the missions account. He was quiet for a long moment, tracing the numbers with his finger. When he finally looked up, his face was grave. These are serious allegations, Sarah. I hope you understand that. I do. And there's more. Before I could continue, my phone buzzed. A text from David, where are you? Mom's asking questions and I'm running out of excuses. Then another, please tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing. And a third, Sarah, answer me. I turned the phone face down and focused on Pastor Williams. Friday night, I overheard a conversation between Margaret and Robert Mitchell in the choir room. They were discussing both the missing money and their personal relationship. The color drained from Pastor Williams' face. They're what? They're having an affair. She specifically mentioned that no one suspected them because everyone thought they were just dedicated volunteers working late. Pastor Williams sank back in his chair like I'd physically struck him. Robert Mitchell had been choir director for 8 years, was married with 2 teenage daughters. Margaret was a pillar of the church community, the woman other wives came to for marriage counseling. Sarah, these are incredibly serious accusations. If you're wrong. I know what I heard. I pulled out my phone and showed him the voice recording I'd made. I went back Tuesday night after the midweek service and waited. They have a pattern. His hand shook slightly as he took the phone. The audio was clear enough, Margaret's voice discussing the money, Robert's guilty responses, and enough intimate conversation to make their relationship crystal clear. We sat in silence as the recording played, and I watched Pastor Williams age 5 years in 5 minutes. Dear Lord, he whispered when it ended. Robert's wife, his children. And the orphanage in Guatemala that's missing thousands of dollars, I added quietly. My phone was buzzing constantly now. David's panic was escalating with each ignored message, and I could picture him making excuses to his mother while wondering if his wife was about to blow up his family. Pastor Williams stood abruptly and walked to his window, staring out at the parking lot where families were loading into cars, heading home to Sunday dinners and normal lives. Why are you bringing this to me now? He asked without turning around. Why not your husband first? The question I'd been dreading. Because the honest answer made me sound vindictive and petty, even though I knew it wasn't that simple. Because Margaret has been conducting a campaign to destroy my reputation in this church for months, I said finally. She's been telling people I'm a bad influence on David, that he should divorce me, that I'm immoral and godless. Meanwhile, she's stealing from orphans and sleeping with a married man. Pastor Williams turned back to me, his expression unreadable. So this is revenge. This is justice. She's made my life hell while playing the role of moral authority. She's stolen money from children who need it and she's destroying Robert's family with lies. Someone needs to hold her accountable. And you've appointed yourself to that role. The judgment in his voice stung because it hit too close to home. Was this about justice, or was it about hurting someone who'd hurt me first? Before I could answer, there was a sharp knock on the office door. Pastor Williams? Margaret's voice carried clearly through the wood. I saw Sarah come in here, and I'm concerned about what stories she might be telling. That girl has been struggling with some troubling behaviors lately, and I'd hate for her to involve the church in her personal problems. Pastor Williams and I locked eyes across his desk. The evidence was still spread between us like an accusation waiting to explode. Could you give us just a few more minutes, Margaret? Pastor Williams called back. Of course, Pastor. I'll be right outside when you're ready to discuss this properly. The threat was unmistakable. She knew exactly what I was doing in here, and she was positioning herself to control the narrative. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from David. The three of us were about to collide in Pastor Williams' office, and I suddenly realized I might have underestimated just how far Margaret was willing to go to protect herself. The war I'd started was about to become a battle I wasn't sure I could win. I looked at Pastor Williams, then at my buzzing phone, then at the door where Margaret was waiting to spin whatever narrative would save her reputation. The weight of the moment pressed down on me like a physical force. Answer it, Pastor Williams said quietly, nodding toward my phone. But put it on speaker. David's voice filled the small office, tight with barely controlled panic. Sarah, where are you? Mom says you've been acting strange lately, and she's worried you might be having some kind of breakdown. She thinks you're trying to cause problems at church because you're upset about. About what, David? I interrupted, watching Pastor Williams' face. About the things she said. Look, I know she was out of line with those voicemails, but going to Pastor Williams isn't going to solve anything. It's just going to make everything worse. So he knew exactly where I was and why. Of course Margaret had sent him to do damage control. Worse for who? I asked. For everyone. For us. Sarah, please, whatever you think you know. I don't think I know anything, David. I have proof. Audio recordings, financial documents, bank records. My voice was getting louder, and I could see Pastor Williams glancing nervously at the door. Your mother isn't just spreading rumors about me. She's stealing money and having an affair. Dead silence on the other end. Then, that's impossible. You're upset and you're not thinking clearly. She's sleeping with Robert Mitchell. They've been skimming money from the missions fund for years. I heard them together, David. I have it recorded. Another long pause. When David spoke again, his voice was different, smaller, like he was deflating. Even if that were true, this isn't how you handle it. You should have come to me first. We could have worked something out privately. Worked something out? I stared at the phone in disbelief. David, she's been destroying my reputation for months while stealing from orphans. What exactly were you planning to work out? Before he could answer, the office door opened. Margaret walked in without invitation, her face a mask of concerned motherly love. Behind her, looking mortified, was Robert Mitchell. She'd brought back up. Pastor Williams, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I'm genuinely worried about Sarah's mental state, she began, not even glancing at the documents spread across his desk. She's been making wild accusations, and Robert happened to mention that she was acting strangely at church this week. Robert nodded reluctantly. She seemed agitated, asking odd questions about committee work. I watched this performance with a mixture of rage and admiration. Margaret had orchestrated this perfectly. She brought Robert to corroborate her story, positioned me as unstable, and was now standing in front of evidence of her own crimes while playing the concerned mother-in-law. Sarah's been under a lot of stress, Margaret continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. The adjustment to married life, trying to fit into our church community, feeling like she doesn't quite belong. Sometimes when people feel isolated, they lash out by creating drama. Pastor Williams looked between Margaret and the financial records on his desk. I could see him wavering, wanting to believe the woman he'd known for 15 years over the newcomer with a folder full of accusations. Is David still on the phone? Robert asked, noticing my cell phone. He's worried sick, Margaret said. We all are. Sarah, honey, whatever you think is happening, we can work through it together as a family. But making wild accusations isn't going to help anyone. My phone crackled with David's voice. Sarah, please. Just come home and we'll talk about this. I looked around the room, at Pastor Williams clutching my evidence, at Margaret playing her role perfectly, at Robert sweating but backing her story, at my phone broadcasting my husband's desperation for me to just let this go. Play the recording, I said to Pastor Williams. Margaret's mask slipped for just a fraction of a second. What recording? The one where you and Robert discuss how much money you've stolen and how no one suspects your affair because you're such dedicated volunteers. Robert went white. Margaret's concerned expression never wavered, but I saw her hands clench. Sarah, that's enough, David's voice came through the phone. You're embarrassing yourself. That's when I realized the truth that hit me like a physical blow. David already knew. Maybe not about the money, but about Robert. The way he was so desperate for me to stop, so eager to handle this privately, so sure this would make everything worse. He knew his mother was having an affair, and he was more concerned about protecting her reputation than supporting his wife. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that for a moment I couldn't speak. Margaret must have seen something in my face because she pressed her advantage. Pastor Williams, I think we need to consider whether Sarah needs some professional help. This kind of paranoid thinking, making recordings, creating elaborate conspiracy theories, it's very concerning. She was good. Really good. But I was done playing by her rules. I walked over to Pastor Williams' computer and pulled up the church's financial database that I'd studied so carefully. My hands were steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Pastor Williams, could you pull up the missions fund account from March of this year? Sarah, this really isn't necessary, Margaret began, but I cut her off. March 15th. There should be a withdrawal for administrative costs. $500. Pastor Williams hesitated, looking between Margaret and me, then slowly turned to his computer. The silence stretched as he navigated to the account. There is a withdrawal on that date, he said quietly. Now check Margaret's volunteer expense reports for that same period. This is ridiculous, Margaret said, but her voice had a slight edge now. I don't have to justify every penny I spend on church business. The report shows office supplies and printing costs totaling $73, Pastor Williams read from the screen. For administrative work on the missions fundraiser. So where did the other $427 go? I asked. Robert shifted uncomfortably. There are always unexpected expenses. Like the bottle of $40 wine Margaret was buying at the grocery store while talking about my character flaws? David's voice crackled through the phone. Sarah, stop. Just stop. But I was past stopping. I pulled out my own phone and opened my photo gallery, showing Pastor Williams the pictures I'd taken of the financial discrepancies. 3 years of administrative costs that don't match any documented expenses. And here, I swiped to another photo, Margaret's social media posts. Designer handbag in February, right after $1,000 withdrawal. Expensive dinner in April, posted the same day as another administrative expense. She's documenting her theft herself. Margaret's face was flushed now, her composure cracking. This is harassment. I won't stand here and let this unstable woman. Then explain the money, Margaret. Pastor Williams' voice was quiet but firm. Show me receipts for these administrative costs. I don't carry every receipt around with me. But you do keep meticulous records for tax purposes, I interrupted. You mentioned it yourself during the stewardship meeting. How you keep every church-related receipt for the IRS. The trap was closing, and she knew it. Margaret's eyes darted between Pastor Williams and Robert, looking for support that wasn't coming. Robert looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. There's been some confusion about the accounting, she said finally, her voice losing its sweetness. I can provide documentation. What about the affair? I asked bluntly. The room went dead silent. Even David's breathing on the phone seemed to stop. That's a vicious lie, Margaret said, but her voice shook. Robert, do you want to tell your wife, or should I? I asked. Don't, Robert whispered. Please. My daughters should know that their father is cheating on their mother with a woman who steals from orphans. I turned back to Pastor Williams. Play the recording. Margaret lunged for my phone, her mask finally completely gone. You have no right. Pastor Williams caught her wrist. Margaret, sit down. The authority in his voice stopped her cold. She sank into a chair, her face a mixture of rage and panic. My phone buzzed with another call. This time it wasn't David, it was Linda Mitchell. Robert, her voice came through clearly. Margaret called and said there was some kind of emergency meeting. Is everything okay? The irony was perfect. Margaret had called Robert's wife herself, probably trying to get ahead of whatever story she thought I might tell. Robert looked at his phone like it was a snake about to bite him. Answer it, Pastor Williams said quietly. Mrs. Mitchell deserves to know what her husband has been doing in the house of God. And that's when everything truly exploded. Robert's phone kept ringing, Linda's name flashing on the screen like an accusation. His hand trembled as he stared at it, sweat beading on his forehead. Answer it, Pastor Williams repeated, his voice carrying the weight of 15 years of spiritual authority. I can't, Robert whispered. You don't understand, Linda just had surgery last month. Her heart condition. The stress could literally. Should have thought of that before you decided to commit adultery, I said, surprised by the coldness in my own voice. Margaret shot me a look of pure hatred. You sanctimonious little bitch. You have no idea what you're destroying. The mask was completely off now. Pastor Williams actually recoiled at the venom in her voice. Margaret, he started, but she was on a roll. You think you're so righteous? You worked at a bar, serving alcohol to married men, flirting for tips. At least I'm not a hypocrite about what I am. What you are, I said slowly, is a thief and an adulterer who's been playing the moral authority while destroying other people's lives. Robert's phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Through my own phone, I could hear David's muffled voice talking to someone, probably trying to figure out damage control. Pastor Williams walked over to Robert, who looked like he was about to have a panic attack. Son, you have a choice to make right now. You can face this with whatever dignity you have left, or we can let your wife hear about it from someone else. She'll leave me, Robert said, his voice breaking. 30 years of marriage, gone. And my girls, they'll never forgive me. You should have considered that before you decided to steal money and screw Margaret in God's house, I snapped. The brutality of my own words shocked me, but I was past caring. These people had been playing games with my life for months while living lies that made my supposed sins look like Sunday school infractions. Margaret stood up abruptly. I'm not listening to this anymore. Pastor Williams, if you choose to believe the word of this disturbed woman over mine, then this church has bigger problems than you know. She headed for the door, but Pastor Williams moved to block her path. You're not leaving until we settle this, Margaret. Not with church money missing and these accusations hanging in the air. You can't hold me here against my will. But I can call the police about the missing funds, he replied quietly. Is that what you want? Margaret's face went pale. Behind her, Robert's phone had finally stopped ringing, but now Pastor Williams' office phone was buzzing. The church receptionist's extension. That's probably Linda, I said. When Robert didn't answer, she called the main number. The color drained completely from Robert's face. She knows I'm here. I told her I was meeting with Pastor Williams about Christmas music planning. Margaret whirled on him. You told her you were here? You idiot. Don't call him an idiot for telling the truth to his wife, Pastor Williams said sharply. Something you both seem to have forgotten how to do. Through my phone, David's voice suddenly got clearer. Sarah, I'm coming down there. Don't say anything else until I get there. Don't bother, I said. I think I've said enough. But even as I spoke, I realized the situation was spiraling beyond anything I'd planned. Linda Mitchell was about to walk into the middle of a confrontation that could literally give her a heart attack. The police might get involved. And David was racing here to do what? Protect his mother from the consequences of her own actions? Margaret seemed to sense the shift in momentum. Her voice took on that familiar manipulative sweetness as she turned to Pastor Williams. Whatever mistakes may have been made, surely we can handle this within our church family. Think about Linda's health, about Robert's daughters, about David and Sarah's marriage. Going public with this will destroy innocent people. It was expertly done, shifting focus to the collateral damage, making me look like the villain for exposing their crimes. Pastor Williams looked genuinely torn. Margaret, if money has been taken, money can be returned. Mistakes can be forgiven. But some damage can never be undone. She was right about that last part, and we all knew it. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would change everything permanently. The office phone rang again, more insistent this time. I stared at the ringing phone, knowing that each ring was another second closer to complete destruction. Not just for Margaret and Robert, but potentially for Linda Mitchell's fragile health, for Robert's teenage daughters, for David's relationship with his family, and for any chance I had of salvaging my marriage. Answer it, I said to Pastor Williams, surprising everyone including myself. His eyebrows shot up. Sarah. Answer it. Put it on speaker. Margaret's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? I honestly wasn't sure, but some instinct was telling me that controlling this narrative meant controlling who got to tell Linda Mitchell the truth about her husband. Pastor Williams hesitated, then picked up the phone. Linda? Yes, Robert is here. We're having a committee meeting about the Christmas program. Linda's voice came through clearly, sweet and slightly breathless. Oh good. I was worried when he didn't answer his cell. You know how paranoid I get since the surgery. She laughed, the sound innocent and trusting. Could you tell him that Sarah Chin called? She wanted to ask about helping with the music this year. Isn't that wonderful? David's new wife wants to get more involved. The irony hit the room like a physical blow. Here was Linda, excited about my potential involvement in church activities, while I was in the process of destroying her world. Margaret shot me a look that clearly said, see what you're about to do to this sweet woman? But Robert looked green, sweat now visible on his forehead. Tell her I'll call her back in a few minutes, he managed. Robert says he'll call you back shortly, Pastor Williams relayed. Perfect. Oh, and Pastor Williams? Thank you for everything you've done for our family this year. Having church leadership we can trust has meant so much, especially during my recovery. The line went dead, leaving us all staring at each other in the heavy silence. 30 years, Robert whispered. She baked cookies for the church picnic last week even though she was exhausted from physical therapy. She trusts me completely. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to fuck my mother-in-law, came David's voice from my phone, sharp and bitter. Everyone turned to stare at my phone in shock. David's voice continued, clearer now like he was walking closer to wherever he'd been standing. Oh, what? Did you all think I didn't know? Mom's been sneaking around for 2 years, lying about committee meetings, coming home with expensive things she couldn't afford. You think I'm blind? Margaret's face went white. David. And you, his voice was directed at me now, decided the best way to handle this was to blow up everyone's lives publicly instead of talking to your husband first. I felt like I'd been slapped. Talking to you? David, you knew about this and said nothing. You let your mother destroy my reputation while she was living a complete lie. Because I was trying to protect people. Linda doesn't deserve this. Robert's kids don't deserve this. But you couldn't just handle it quietly, could you? You had to make it nuclear. The office phone rang again. This time Pastor Williams looked at the caller ID and his face went grim. It's Board Chairman Stevens. Someone else knows. Margaret sank into her chair, the fight finally going out of her. Helen Crawford, she said dully. I saw her in the parking lot when we came in. She's got the biggest mouth in the county. What did you expect? I asked, finding my voice again. You taught me that reputation is everything in this community. You spent months making sure everyone knew about my supposed moral failings. Did you really think your own wouldn't come to light eventually? The phone kept ringing. Through my cell phone, I could hear David's footsteps getting closer, probably climbing the church steps. In a few minutes, he'd be here, and we'd all have to face the consequences of choices that had been building toward this moment for months. Robert looked at his own phone, where 2 missed calls from Linda were showing. I have to tell her before someone else does. Robert, wait, Margaret started, but he was already dialing. The explosion was about to get bigger. Robert's finger hovered over Linda's number, his hand shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. But before he could dial, the office door burst open. David strode in, his face flushed from running, taking in the scene, his mother slumped in defeat, Robert on the verge of collapse, me standing behind Pastor Williams' desk like I was conducting some twisted trial, and the evidence of his family's crimes spread across every surface. Hang up the phone, Sarah, he said, his voice deadly quiet. This ends now. I'm not on the phone anymore, David. But your mother's boyfriend is about to call his wife. David's jaw clenched. Robert, don't make that call. Not yet. I have to, Robert whispered. She's going to hear it from someone else if I don't. No, David said firmly. First we figure out how to minimize the damage. Sarah, you started this, so you're going to help us finish it the right way. I stared at my husband, this man I thought I knew, as he stood there trying to orchestrate a cover-up. The right way? David, they stole money from orphans. They destroyed a marriage. Your mother has been systematically ruining my reputation for months. What exactly is the right way to handle that? The way that doesn't give Linda Mitchell a heart attack or traumatize 2 teenage girls, he snapped back. The way that doesn't destroy our marriage in the process. Margaret looked up with something like hope flickering in her eyes. David's right. We can fix this quietly. I'll return the money, Robert will end things with me, and we can all move forward. Like nothing happened? I asked incredulously. Like adults who understand that sometimes protecting innocent people matters more than being right, David said. Pastor Williams, who had been silent through this exchange, finally spoke up. That's not how this works. There are procedures for financial irregularities. The board has to be notified. And Linda has a right to know about her husband's infidelity. Even if it kills her? Robert asked desperately. Because it could, literally. Her cardiologist said any major stress. The office phone rang again. This time it was a different extension, the one that connected directly to the sanctuary. Someone was in the church proper, probably looking for us. Through my cell phone, which was somehow still connected to David's line, a new voice came through. David? Is that your car outside? Your mother asked me to check. It was Linda Mitchell's voice, sweet and concerned. She was here. In the building. Robert dropped his phone like it had caught fire. She came looking for me. She's here. Margaret shot to her feet. We have to tell her something. She can't find us all in here together like this. David moved toward the door. I'll handle it. I'll tell her there was a scheduling mix-up, that Robert left already. And then what? I asked. We all just pretend this conversation never happened? Your mother keeps stealing money and sleeping with married men while I continue to get crucified at church functions? We figure it out, David said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Quietly. Like families do. That's when I understood the fundamental difference between us. David saw this as a family problem to be managed. I saw it as a moral crisis that demanded justice. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, Linda's voice calling for Robert, getting closer. In 30 seconds, everything would be out of our hands. Margaret looked at me with something that might have been desperation. Please, she whispered. Whatever you think of me, Linda doesn't deserve this. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Then came a soft knock. Robert? Pastor Williams? I'm sorry to interrupt, but Robert's phone keeps going to voicemail and I was worried. We all froze, staring at the door like it was about to explode. The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Linda's voice came through the door again, more concerned now. I can hear voices in there. Is everything all right? Pastor Williams looked at each of us, his face grave. Robert was hyperventilating, Margaret had gone completely pale, and David was positioning himself like he could physically block whatever was about to happen. Just a moment, Linda, Pastor Williams called out, his voice carefully controlled. But Linda Mitchell wasn't the type to be easily dismissed. The door handle turned. I'm coming in. Robert, if you're having another one of your anxiety attacks. She stepped into the office and stopped dead, taking in the scene. Her eyes moved from face to face, landing on the financial documents scattered across Pastor Williams' desk, then on her husband who looked like he was about to collapse. What's going on? She asked slowly, her voice smaller now. Robert opened his mouth but no sound came out. Margaret was studying her hands like they held the secrets of the universe. David stepped forward, clearly preparing to launch into some explanation that would minimize the damage. I looked at Linda Mitchell, this sweet woman who'd brought me homemade soup when I had the flu last month, who'd complimented my singing voice and asked if I'd considered joining the choir her husband directed. Who trusted her husband completely and was standing here in her recovery clothes, still fragile from surgery, about to have her world destroyed. Linda, I said quietly, maybe you should sit down. Why? What happened? Robert, you're scaring me. That's when I noticed something that changed everything. Linda's purse was open, and I could see her phone inside. The screen was lit up with what looked like a text message thread. She'd been communicating with someone before she came looking for Robert. Linda, Pastor Williams said gently, there are some things we need to discuss about church finances and... I know, Linda interrupted, her voice suddenly steadier. Helen Crawford called me 20 minutes ago. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. Helen Crawford, church gossip extraordinaire, had already gotten to Linda. She told me there were rumors about Robert and Margaret. About money missing from the missions fund. Linda's voice was getting stronger, not weaker. She said David's wife was making accusations. Margaret's head snapped up. Linda, you can't believe. Is it true? Linda asked, looking directly at her husband. Are you having an affair with this woman? Robert's silence was answer enough. But Linda didn't collapse. She didn't clutch her chest or show any signs of the medical emergency we'd all been dreading. Instead, she nodded slowly, like she was confirming something she'd already suspected. I wondered about those late meetings. About the credit card charges at restaurants I'd never been to. About how you started dressing differently, wearing cologne to committee work. She turned to Margaret. And you. Calling my house to check Robert's schedule, making sure I was handling recovery okay so you'd know when he'd be free. Margaret's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Helen also mentioned something about money? Linda continued, her gaze moving to Pastor Williams. David found his voice. Linda, maybe we should discuss this when you've had time to process. I've had 2 years to process, Linda said sharply. 2 years of wondering why my husband was acting strange, why Margaret suddenly became so interested in my health and schedule, why money was tight despite Robert's promotion at work. She walked over to Pastor Williams' desk and picked up one of the financial documents. Her hands weren't shaking. The question is, she said, looking around the room, what are we going to do about it now? The woman we'd all been trying to protect had just taken control of the entire situation. And I had the distinct feeling that Linda Mitchell was about to surprise us all. Linda Mitchell set the financial document back down on Pastor Williams' desk with deliberate precision, then walked over to one of the empty chairs and sat down like she was settling in for a long conversation. Robert, close your mouth. You look ridiculous, she said calmly. Margaret, stop looking at me like I'm about to have a heart attack. And David, you can stop hovering by the door like you're planning an escape route. The transformation was stunning. The sweet, fragile woman who'd knocked on the door 5 minutes ago had been replaced by someone who radiated quiet authority. Helen Crawford has been calling people for the past hour, Linda continued, folding her hands in her lap. By now, half the congregation knows there's some kind of scandal brewing. The other half will know by dinner time. Margaret found her voice first. Linda, I know how this must look. It looks like my husband has been stealing money from orphans while having an affair with a woman who's been pretending to be my friend. Linda's tone was conversational, almost pleasant. Is that not how it looks to everyone else? Robert made a strangled sound. Linda, please, let me explain. Explain what? That you've been lying to me for 2 years? That while I was having heart surgery, you were sleeping with someone else? That you used our financial troubles as an excuse to steal from children? Each word was delivered like a surgical strike. I found myself feeling sorry for Robert, which wasn't an emotion I'd expected. Or maybe, Linda continued, you want to explain why you let me blame myself for our money problems? How many nights did I lie awake wondering what we were doing wrong, why we couldn't seem to get ahead financially? Pastor Williams cleared his throat. Linda, I think we should focus on how to move forward constructively. Oh, we're absolutely going to move forward, she said, turning that eerily calm gaze on him. But first, I want to understand exactly what's been happening in my life without my knowledge. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through something. According to Helen, this all came out because Margaret has been spreading rumors about Sarah's character while living a rather colorful secret life herself. Is that accurate? I felt every eye in the room turn to me. That's a simplified version, but yes. And you discovered the affair and the missing money, how exactly? I overheard them together. Then I did some research into the financial discrepancies. Linda nodded thoughtfully. Good for you. Robert always was careless about covering his tracks. She looked at her husband with something that wasn't quite contempt but was definitely disappointment. Remember when the girls were little and you tried to hide that you'd eaten their Halloween candy? You left the wrappers in your car. This isn't the same thing, Robert protested weakly. You're right. It's worse. Much worse. David stepped forward. Linda, I know you're upset, but maybe we should discuss this privately. Why? Linda asked, genuinely curious. So you can help your mother and my husband figure out damage control? So we can all pretend this didn't happen and go back to playing happy church family? She stood up and walked over to Margaret, who shrank back in her chair. Margaret, dear, I need you to understand something very clearly. You didn't just sleep with my husband. You made me complicit in your theft by having me help organize fundraising events where you stole money. You sat in my kitchen drinking coffee while planning your next rendezvous. You held my hand and prayed for my recovery while betraying everything our friendship was supposed to mean. Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far. And now my question is, what exactly did you think was going to happen? That you and Robert would run away together? That he'd leave his family for you? Robert and Margaret exchanged a look that was answer enough. Oh my God, Linda breathed, the first crack appearing in her composure. You actually thought, you were planning. That's when my phone rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Don't answer that, David said quickly. But Linda was already looking at my phone with interest. Actually, I think she should answer it. I have a feeling we're about to find out just how far this story has spread. The phone kept ringing, and I realized that whatever came next would determine not just the fate of everyone in this room, but the entire future of Riverside Baptist Church. I answered the phone. Sarah? This is Janet Morrison from Channel 7 News. We've received reports about financial irregularities and misconduct at Riverside Baptist Church. Would you be available for an on-camera interview this evening? The blood drained from my face. How did you get this number? Helen Crawford reached out to us about an hour ago. She seemed very concerned about what she called corruption in local religious leadership. Are the allegations true? Everyone in the room was staring at me with expressions ranging from panic to resignation. Helen Crawford hadn't just been making phone calls to church members, she'd contacted the media. I can't comment right now, I managed. We understand this is sensitive, but the public has a right to know if charitable donations are being misused. We're planning to run a story on the 11 o'clock news. With or without your cooperation. I hung up and looked around the room. Channel 7 News. They're running a story tonight. Margaret let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Helen Crawford. That vindictive old witch actually called the news. This is exactly what I was trying to prevent, David said, running his hands through his hair. Now it's going to be everywhere. Pastor Williams sank into his chair. The district office will have to get involved. There'll be investigations, audits, formal procedures. Good, Linda said firmly. There should be investigations. Robert, how much money did you steal? It wasn't stealing, exactly. How much? Robert looked like he wanted to disappear. Maybe $8,000 over 3 years. But we were going to pay it back. With what money? The money you told me we didn't have for my medical bills? The money we supposedly couldn't afford for Katie's college applications? I watched this family implode in real time and felt a sick twist in my stomach. Yes, I'd wanted Margaret exposed. Yes, I'd wanted justice. But seeing Linda discover that her financial stress during medical recovery was caused by her husband's theft felt like watching someone's soul break. Linda, Margaret said suddenly, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I never wanted you to get hurt. Linda turned to her with a look of such pure disgust that Margaret actually flinched. You're sorry? You helped my husband steal money while I was rationing my heart medications because I thought we couldn't afford the co-pays. That's not, we didn't know. You knew exactly what you were doing. Both of you. Linda pulled out her phone again. Now I need to call my daughters before they hear about this on the evening news. As if summoned by her words, Robert's phone started ringing. The caller ID showed Katie, one of his daughters. Don't answer it, Margaret said quickly. Answer it, Linda countered. She deserves to hear this from her father. Robert stared at the phone like it was a bomb about to explode. It stopped ringing, then immediately started again. She knows something's wrong, Linda said. Teenage girls have radar for family drama. Pastor Williams' office phone rang again. This time it was the main church line, probably reporters calling for comment. David looked at me with something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Not anger, not disappointment, but a kind of resigned sadness that made my chest tight. Are you happy now? He asked quietly. Is this what justice looks like to you? Before I could answer, we heard voices in the hallway, multiple people talking loudly, footsteps coming closer. Through the frosted glass of Pastor Williams' office door, I could see shadows of what looked like several people approaching. Someone knocked, firm and official. Pastor Williams? This is Detective Morrison with the County Sheriff's Office. We need to speak with you about some financial allegations. The police were here. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Pastor Williams, we know there are people in there. Please open the door. I looked around the room at these people who had all played their parts in bringing us to this moment. Margaret, still clutching her purse like it could somehow protect her from what was coming. Robert, staring at his phone as it rang again with what was probably his other daughter calling. David, watching his family's world collapse with that same resigned expression. Linda, sitting perfectly straight in her chair like she was preparing for battle. And Pastor Williams, reaching for the door handle with hands that shook slightly. Wait, I said, surprising myself. Everyone turned to look at me. Before the police come in, before this becomes official, I need to say something. I took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. Linda, I'm sorry. Not for exposing the truth, but for how you had to find out. You deserved better than this. Linda nodded once, crisply. Thank you. But don't apologize for doing what no one else had the courage to do. The door opened and Detective Morrison stepped in, followed by another officer I didn't recognize. The detective was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes that took in the scene with professional assessment. Pastor Williams? I'm Detective Morrison. We've received reports about potential embezzlement from your church's charitable funds. Margaret stood up slowly. I assume you're here about me. Ma'am, I'll need to speak with everyone individually, but yes, your name has been mentioned. Then let's get this over with. Margaret's voice had found some of its old authority. I took approximately $8,000 from various church fundraisers over 3 years. The records are all there on Pastor Williams' desk. The detective's eyebrows rose slightly at the immediate confession. I'm not proud of it, Margaret continued, but I'm tired of pretending. I used the money for personal expenses. I falsified documentation. I involved Robert Mitchell in both the financial irregularities and in an extramarital affair. Robert made a sound of protest, but Margaret kept talking. My daughter-in-law discovered what we were doing. Instead of confronting me privately, she brought evidence to church leadership. Which was absolutely the right thing to do. I stared at Margaret, not sure I'd heard correctly. Ma'am, you don't have to say anything without an attorney present, the detective said carefully. I don't want an attorney. I want this finished. Margaret turned to Linda. You were right about everything. We planned to leave our families. We thought we could just disappear and start over somewhere else with money we'd stolen from children who needed it more than we did. Linda's face was unreadable. And now? Now I'm going to face whatever consequences come. And I'm going to pay back every penny, with interest. The detective was taking notes rapidly. Mr. Mitchell, is this account accurate? Robert nodded miserably. Yes. All of it. 2 hours later, after statements and paperwork and phone calls, I found myself sitting in the church parking lot with David. Margaret had been taken to the station, though she wouldn't be charged until the formal investigation was complete. Robert had gone home to face his daughters. Linda had driven herself to her sister's house, saying she needed space to think. So, David said finally. Where does this leave us? I'd been dreading this conversation, but also knowing it was inevitable. I don't know. You knew about your mother's affair and you said nothing. You were more concerned with protecting her reputation than supporting your wife. I was trying to protect everyone. Including me? He was quiet for a long moment. I thought if I could manage it quietly, you'd never have to know how bad it really was. But it was bad, David. It was theft and adultery and character assassination. And instead of standing up to it, you asked me to endure it. A car pulled up next to us, Linda Mitchell, driving alone. She rolled down her window. Sarah? Could I talk to you for a minute? I got out and walked over to her car, leaving David sitting in stunned silence. I wanted to thank you, Linda said. Robert told me you tried to protect me from finding out about his heart condition concerns. But you know what? Learning the truth didn't kill me. Living with lies almost did. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. This is for you. Don't open it now. Linda, you don't need to. Yes, I do. What you did today took courage. It cost you, probably more than you know yet. But sometimes the right thing is expensive. As she drove away, I opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $8,000 and a note for the Guatemala orphanage. Some theft should be repaid immediately. Thank you for being braver than the rest of us. I walked back to David, who was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. What happens now? He asked. I folded Linda's check carefully and put it in my pocket. Now we decide whether we're going to build a marriage based on truth or convenient lies. Because David, if you can't stand up for what's right when it's your own family doing wrong, I don't know how we're supposed to trust each other with anything that really matters. 3 months later, Margaret pled guilty to embezzlement and was sentenced to community service and full restitution. Robert and Linda separated, though Linda told me she was considering reconciliation after counseling. The church survived the scandal, barely, with new financial oversight procedures. David and I went to marriage counseling, where we slowly, painfully, learned how to choose each other instead of choosing peace. Some wars are worth fighting. Some prices are worth paying. And sometimes, the people who try to destroy your reputation end up destroying only themselves. Margaret never called David again to complain about his godless harlot wife. I considered that a victory.